Welcome to this new video. As I promised, here we are with the second and final part of ranking the best cities in Red Dead Redemption 2. But before we start, if you're new here, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Sofia, I study architecture in Rome and I've always loved video games. And on this channel, I basically combine those two passions and overanalyze virtual buildings for fun. So if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, I really appreciate it. So last time we analyzed the worst cities in Red Dead Redemption 2, so if you missed that video, go check it out. And today we are focusing on the top 5. And just as a reminder, I'm ranking these towns according to 10 parameters that are water access, security, architecture, housing quality, social spaces, essential shops, transportation, healthcare, urban greenery, and pollution. So let's get started. In 5th place we have Valentine. Now, when it comes to water access, Valentine isn't exactly in the perfect position. It's not directly built on the banks of a major river, so the town likely depends more on wells, rainwater collection, or smaller local water sources. The Dakota River is relatively nearby, but not close enough to function as an immediate urban water source. So even if water access isn't terrible, it's definitely not one of Valentine's strongest points. About security, Valentine does a bit better. We do have a sheriff in town, and despite the occasional chaos, because, well, we are talking about Valentine, the population generally feels reasonably controlled. It's definitely not perfect, but compared to many other settlements in the game, law enforcement actually exists. And honestly, in this wild world, that already feels like incredible. Architecturally, Valentine is extremely likable. The town fully embraces that classic Old West aesthetic with wooden frame buildings lining the main street. And honestly, what I find most interesting is that during the first part of the game we actually see some structures still under construction, while by the epilogue parts of the town feel more complete and developed. That small detail makes Valentine feel like an evolving settlement, and I have to admit, I get why so many players love this place. The buildings are charming, recognizable, and despite their simplicity, they generally appear functional and relatively comfortable. Some smaller wooden houses are scattered around the surrounding area as well, which reinforces the feeling that this is an actively growing town. So overall, it feels livable. Going on to social spaces, Valentine performs very well here. We have not one but 2 saloons, which, let's be honest, in the Wild West is basically heaven. There are also open public areas and enough informal social spaces for the town to feel active and communal. About shops and services, well, this is where Valentine really starts earning points. For a relatively small town, it offers an impressive number of essential services: general stores, a hotel, a butcher, a stable, a barber, a gunsmith, and a post office where you can pay off bounties. And there is even a small theater, even if it's pretty rudimentary, but still. So while Valentine may not be massive, it offers a surprisingly complete urban experience. About transportation, we could say that Valentine is also very well connected. It has both a train station and a stagecoach access, which makes it far more accessible than many other towns in the game, and so you could easily reach almost every other part of the map. Going on to healthcare, this town somehow has a doctor, and nope, it's not a bug. Finally, a place in this endless Wild West where healthcare isn't treated like an optional side quest. Of course, the services are still fairly basic, but compared to some previous towns, this already feels revolutionary. When it comes to greenery, Valentine doesn't really have parks or proper green spaces, but it's still surrounded by beautiful nature. So even if the town itself is pretty simple, all that nature around makes a big difference. Another positive aspect is that Valentine isn't industrially polluted. But let's talk about the mud. This town is basically perpetually muddy. Between the dirt roads, horse traffic, scattered waste, and the general frontier atmosphere, clearly this is not exactly Valentine's strongest quality. It may not be polluted, but it's not exactly hygienic either. But that's completely okay, because at least you can take a nice bath at the hotel for only 25 cents. So in the end, Valentine scores 70 points, which places it in 5th position in my ranking. So would I live here? Honestly, probably yes. And now let's move on to the next city, Strawberry, the small mountain town that a lot of players, including me, absolutely love. Starting with water access, I give it a 10 out of 10 because honestly, there is no better place in Red Dead Redemption 2 when it comes to clean drinking water. Strawberry is literally built around Hawkseye Creek, a clear and clean river, which is a huge luxury for a town in this world. When it comes to safety, we know the town has 2 sheriffs during the game because the first one dies when Arthur saves that dumbass Micah from being hanged, but overall it's a very small town where almost nothing happens, and so it's quite a safe place. The only dangerous thing here is getting killed by boredom. The architecture is very nice to look at. We are talking about wooden cabins perfectly in line with the mountain environment with steep roofs. It honestly feels like a mountain holiday village, and even the housing quality feels very comfortable and well designed. The only big problem of Strawberry is the social spaces, like this is basic stuff. We are in the Wild West, how can there be no saloon in town? Especially with such a cold weather where you can't really stay outside in the evening. This is a real missing point. When it comes to essential shops, we have a general store for many basic goods, a butcher for fresh meat, and a post office. So it's not extremely well supplied, but it is enough to pass. Transportation is quite weak too. The closest train station is Riggs Station, and inside the town we only have a stagecoach, so it is not enough to properly connect Strawberry to the outside world, and this makes it feel like a small isolated bubble, almost like a preserved natural ecosystem. There is no usable doctor in game also, or better said, there is a doctor and we see him when Abigail works there cleaning, but we cannot actually use his services, so we consider it, but with a small note. About greenery, I really loved how Strawberry is completely surrounded by mountain nature, dense forests, and a cold flowing river. It feels very immersive and natural, and this also goes hand in hand with the lack of pollution. This is not an industrial town at all, of course. However, it is not perfectly clean either, since you can find dirt and trash in some corners of the streets. But in the end, Strawberry scores 80 points, that puts it in 4th place in my ranking. So would I live here? Absolutely yes. Where do I sign? And now let's move on to the next city, Saint-Denis. To better understand what life is really like in this huge city, I basically pretended to live there for a couple days, and I honestly liked it. Of course, it's not perfect, but let's go step by step. Let's start with water access. Saint-Denis is built on the shores of the Lenahechi River, but throughout the city we often notice water containers because, of course, the river itself isn't ideal for drinking, considering it's somewhat polluted, but still better than nothing, since there are cities in this game where water feels like a distant mirage. When it comes to safety, we have both a positive and a negative aspect. It's true that Saint-Denis is a large city, and like any large city, it has a high crime rate, especially in the poorer and more distant neighborhoods. But it's also true that this is one of the few places where we actually see a real legal system. Here we don't have just the usual sheriff anymore, but we have proper police almost everywhere in the city. And now let's talk about my favorite topic, architecture. Saint-Denis absolutely destroys every other city in this category. I mean, do we even need to talk about it? I spent quite a bit of time walking around the city, and every single district I explored had incredibly beautiful buildings, often in completely different architectural styles. And when it comes to housing comfort, the central areas are obviously excellent. The homes are beautiful and well built, but of course the real problem starts when you move away from the center and reach the more distant neighborhoods. That's where buildings become more fragile and neglected. As for social spaces, Saint-Denis once again wins against every other city. We have a complex and clearly planned urban system with proper squares, saloons, theaters, and many gathering spaces. Basically, you never get bored in Saint-Denis, and honestly, spending several in-game days here was genuinely fun, and not once did I feel bored. The same goes for shops and services. There is more than enough of everything. General stores for groceries, open-air markets, tailors, post offices, whatever you need, Saint-Denis probably has it. There is even a doctor offering all kinds of services. Transportation is excellent. We have the main train station connecting the city to the rest of the world, or better, connecting the rest of the world to the city. We also have the only tram system in the entire game, which creates a real urban transportation network. And let's not forget sidewalks for pedestrians, pure modernity. And then there is greenery. Saint-Denis is a very green city, at least by the standards of its time. In fact, its urban design includes large public gardens and tree-lined streets. It's actually very easy to come across proper public parks while simply walking through the city. And while I was wandering around, I even met an adorable border collie that reminded me of my dog. So, with all these amazing qualities, you may be wondering, why is Saint-Denis only in 3rd place in my ranking? Well, now we get to the real downside: pollution and dirt. Saint-Denis is an industrial city with factories inside its urban structure and chimneys constantly throwing smoke into the air. Sometimes this smoke is so thick, it almost feels like fog, and on top of that, some parts of the city are incredibly dirty with abandoned animal carcasses left on the side of the streets, not to mention the extreme poverty in some of the roughest neighborhoods, which can honestly be pretty brutal to see. For all these reasons, Saint-Denis ends up scoring 83 points, placing it in 3rd position in my ranking. At the end of the day, it actually reminds me a little bit of Rome, a huge city with incredible potential, but sometimes a little bit abandoned to itself. So, would I live there? Well, yes, if I'm rich. And now let's move on to the next city. I know I said Rhodes was my favorite, but honestly, I changed my mind as I kept exploring. I started noticing its weaknesses, so I decided to place it in 2nd position in my ranking. So let's start with water access. Rhodes doesn't have easy access to clean water. I mean, yes, it's not far from the river, whose name I'm not even sure I can pronounce, something like Kamassa River, but most buildings still rely on rainwater collection and the weather is relatively dry. When it comes to safety, there is a sheriff in town, but since we are talking about a small settlement, crime levels are generally low as long as Dutch isn't living nearby. Architecturally speaking, some houses are just beautiful with wide porches wrapping all around them, and most of the buildings are unique and face the main street. They are very well kept and the overall atmosphere feels fresh and pleasant. At night, Rhodes becomes even more beautiful. The warm lights, the quiet main street and the whole atmosphere, it all feels charming in a way that's hard to ignore. And honestly, the houses look like places I'd actually want to live in. And also, if you're getting bored, you have a nice saloon as a social meeting point, and even some kind of small squares with benches where people can sit and talk a bit. Here we really start to see the idea of a shared and designed urban space taking shape. When it comes to shops, the essentials are there: a general store, a butcher, a post office and a gunsmith. Also, transportation is very well developed. We have a train station that efficiently connects the town to larger cities, as well as a stagecoach system. There is a doctor, but it's not directly accessible, so we are going to include it anyway, even though at some point in the game it is implied that it dies or disappears. Vegetation in Rhodes is very well kept. You can easily find big trees for shade, as well as house backyards filled with flowers and plants. I absolutely love it. It is not even an industrially polluted town, and overall it is quite clean and well maintained. So in the end, Rhodes scores 87 points, which places it in 2nd position in my ranking. And also look how gorgeous it is during sunset. Oh my gosh. And now let's move on to 1st place in my ranking, the city where I would honestly move immediately: Blackwater. Let's start with water access. Blackwater is framed between the shores of Flatiron Lake and Montana River, which comes down from Owanjila Lake. The city also probably relies on rainwater collection and deep wells, so overall, Blackwater doesn't really have major problems when it comes to water access, which is already a huge advantage compared to many other towns in this more arid region. When it comes to safety, Blackwater is a city where the law actually works. It feels like a Saint-Denis in progress. If you commit a crime in Blackwater, the law will absolutely come after you, but unlike Saint-Denis, Blackwater doesn't seem to have the same high crime rate, which makes it feel much more livable and generally safer. And even if it's not always directly emphasized, the city clearly has a proper law structure, with both police authority and the sheriff. Architecturally speaking, I really love Blackwater. The buildings still maintain a strong Old West identity, so walking through Blackwater still feels right as a cowboy. I mean, you don't feel out of place, which is something Saint-Denis honestly starts to lose. But at the same time, Blackwater is clearly evolving. There are active construction sites, many buildings are being developed in brick and stronger materials instead of simple wood structures. So you really get the feeling that Blackwater wants to become a cultural center on the same level as Saint-Denis, while still keeping its frontier soul. Housing also feels comfortable and well planned, and beyond the city itself, there are scattered homes in the nearby hills and surrounding land that really gives off that classic little house on the prairie feeling. And now let's talk about social spaces. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun spending in-game days in Blackwater. This city is genuinely fun. There are saloons, theaters, activities, lively streets. It really feels like people here actually live. The same goes for shops. Whatever you need, Blackwater has it. Essential stores, services, and honestly, I had way too much fun taking ridiculous pictures of John at the Blackwater photographer. Transportation is probably one of Blackwater's weaker points. In the first Red Dead Redemption, we know the railroad eventually reaches the city, but in Red Dead Redemption 2 there is no train station yet. So the main connections are basically the stagecoach or your horse. And for a city this developed, the lack of more advanced transport infrastructure is definitely noticeable. When it comes to healthcare, there is no accessible doctor in-game. There does seem to be a medical building in town, but it's for rent, so no actual doctor. As for greenery, Blackwater is still deeply connected to its natural environment. There haven't been extreme urban transformations, and the town still opens outward into the surrounding plains. That gives Blackwater a slightly wild feeling that I really like. It may not have that formal parks like Saint-Denis, but it still feels breathable and livable. And this is exactly what really makes Blackwater better than Saint-Denis for me. It isn't heavily polluted. There is no industrial smog, no overwhelming filth, and the streets feel cleaner. That alone makes daily life feel significantly better. Even the more distant parts of town feel more pleasant and livable, and honestly, one of my favorite things in Blackwater is the pier. That Brighton-style pier is so charming. It adds so much personality and gives the city a real shared social space that feels both elegant and fun. In the end, Blackwater truly feels like the perfect balance. It combines many of the advantages of a large city while still preserving its Old West identity. And that is exactly why Blackwater takes first place in my ranking with a total of 89 points. So, would I live here? Absolutely yes, I'm ready to go living there right now. And I also found out there is a real Blackwater in Missouri that may have partly inspired this one. It does kind of resemble it, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye!